Hey, what's up everybody? Today we are going to talk a little bit about Vue.js and we're going to look at properties and I'm going to answer some questions if you're watching the live broadcast, but if you're not watching the live broadcast, don't worry. I still have lots of information for you on Vuejs Properties. And I thought I would just chime in and see how everybody's doing. If you have any questions while you're watching, just leave a comment in the chat box and we will get going here. So first, one thing to keep in mind is that, let me show you here. Hey, what's up, Jordan? What's up, guys? Is that Udemy is having a sale. Shocking. But I just wanted to let you know in the title and description below, I have some links to my favorite Udemy courses. I have to just let everybody know you can get all the courses for $10. Actually, I have a course. I have one I recommended, the Web Development Bootcamp by Colt Steele. I actually did a review on it. If you're interested in that review, you can go to my channel and search for Colt Steele. I'll also leave it in the description below afterwards. So that is just a quick thing. I know this sale ends the end of today, but I know another one starts on Monday, the 25th. So yeah, check out the Udemy sales. They're pretty good. So today we're going to talk about Vue.js. And before we start one more thing, I'm going to show you examples from my book. This is the Vue.js in Action book, which I've been working hard on. It goes everything for Vue.js to introducing you to it, to the instance, forms and inputs, conditional loops, components, advanced components, transitions. We even go to the Vuex, communicating with server, testing. So it goes over everything through that you want to know if you want to get started with Vue.js. I am several chapters in. This is actually examples from chapter 6, which this is a sneak preview because I haven't released chapter 6 on the Meep yet, but we will be doing that soon. So question, can you do some login with JWT auth that stores the token side cookie? That's a good question. I can do that in the future. I don't have that right now, but that'd be a good example. In one of my chapters, I am going over the communication with the server, which we're going to set up a Vue.js app. It's going to have cookies. It's going to have authentication. I'm going to set up a rudimentary backend. Maybe, I don't know what I want to do, is either Express or Rails, maybe even Phoenix. We'll see. And then I'll show, the most important part is I'll show Vue and some of the most common libraries people use with Vue.js and how it can talk to that backend. And we can do authentication and authorization and all that. So that will be pretty fun. But today we will be talking more about properties. So I went ahead and created these examples already so I don't have to do some live coding because that's always doesn't go perfectly well. So the first example, and you guys could see here, probably can't see too well, this is properties. And so right now I'm not using, so there's a couple of ways you can create your Vue.js app. There's something called the Vue CLI. And Vue CLI is a tool that helps package everything together for you. It has one of the options is to include Webpack with it. So you can put everything, your source all the way together, and you use something called single file components. And you kind of structure your app in individual .vue files, and then you put them all, and then the tool builds them all together, uses Babel and everything. But these examples you can actually just run inside the browser. They're just single pages. And so we're not going to go into Vue CLI, but so these are just some ways you can understand the basics of it. Cool. I found out that FreshBooks uses Vue and Ember. That is probably true. So here is just a real simple example of properties. So there's something in Vue.js called props, and this is how you pass information from one place to another in your app. And so in this example, we're passing from our parent, which is, if you look down here, this is new Vue. This is called a Vue.js instance. And this is the root instance of it. And this is kind of a constructor. And this is where we defined our Vue output. So we're saying we're going to create everything in our element app. We're having something called components. So this is how we define components in our application. So we're calling one called my component. And we also have some data associated with it. And these data, you can either put it inside your the template of your Vue.js instance, or you can pass that to your component. So I have a pass string called hello from planet, my number 43, and then I have an object called past object, has a message in there called past object, which is not too difficult to understand. Now, up here, we have these two, we have this div ID app, and you can see here from the Vue instance, we have this EL app, and that's where the main template's going to be. So we have this app here. So within these two right here, you can see we added the my component tag, and that's because we defined something called my component here, and that's being defined inside our Vue instance constructor here, components. And so what we're saying is we're going to pass our my number, pass string, and past object over to num, string, even, and object. And since we're passing these in here, we have to, when we define our component, we have to use something called props. And so we have to explicitly define each property that's going to be passed into the component. And there's a couple ways of doing this, but this one we're showing how we can do validation on it. So this is a couple steps up, but just follow along with me. I'm just giving you an overview of what you can expect. And I go definitely in more detail in the book. But I have this props here, and what I'm saying is I have num, a string, and an object. So here num refers to this num up here. And what I'm saying is the passed in value, which is my number. So if you look at the Vue.js instance constructor, that's my number here is 43. That my number is going to be passed into num, but it's going to do a type validation to make sure it's a number. And it's required true. So in that case, if that is true, it'll show up and it won't give you any warnings in the console. And then I'm doing the same thing for pass string for string. It checks to see if it's a string. And then I have I have an object here, and it's type object. So it defines as an object. It has to be a type object. And then it also, if for some reason, if this object wasn't there, we have a default string that it defaults to, and you have to do that for every object. So it would put hello from object. And then one interesting one here is we called something called even, which the validation for even is checks to see if you do value mod 2, which if you remember mod, when you mod something, you're getting the remainder. So as long as it's 0, then that means it's even. But we know that the number we're passing is 43 is odd. So when we look at it here, it actually gives an error. It'll still display it, but it will give an error in the console below. And you can't really see it. And here it is. So how do you get data from a REST API? So one of the libraries that Vue.js really likes is Axios. So you can definitely set up right inside your Vue application a way to use Axios to connect to your API. Now there is something in the Vue.js world called lifecycle hooks. So just like in React or Ember, you can look at when the component's loaded, when it's not component, when the page is loaded. So what we can do is if we know on page load that we need to grab something from a back end, we can put it in the created lifecycle hook, and then we can have it go in and grab the information from the back end as a promise, and then retrieve it, put it in some kind of variable, and then to display that variable inside the template. And if we wanted something a little bit more complicated where we're sharing data between different routes and different places, we'd probably want to use something like Vuex, which is like Redux in React, if you're familiar with that. So there's a way to do state management in Vue.js when you're getting something a little bit more complicated. But we're not going to go over those in this example, but that'll give you an idea of something that we do. So yeah, this is how we do validation using the Ember, excuse me, I keep on saying Ember. I have Ember in my mind. I was just working on a project using Vue.js. So even, and then past object. So I guess we could try this out if my code doesn't break. If we go back down here and we pass the my number to 44, and we save it. You can see now I refresh this page here and you don't see any errors in the console below because it's an even number. But if we put it back to an odd number, you can see back to invalid. You can't really see it. It says invalid prop, custom validator, check failed for prop even. So you could, this is not a way to like check inputs on your fields like you're checking before you send to the backend. This is more of a way to ensure that the data you're retrieving from the parent component or the parent is actually correct. And so maybe if you're on a team with multiple people and you want to make sure that people are passing the correct data for you that you expect, then you can use these validators in there and then it'll warn in the console. I'm not sure if you, I think it will, I'm not sure if it'll warn if you're in production mode, but in development mode, it definitely will. So we can go into another example. If you guys have any questions, like I said, just throw it in the chat room and I'll try to answer your Vue.js questions. And so dynamic props. So there is a difference in Vue.js. When you're using components, there's literal props, and props kind of just stands for properties, and there's dynamic props. And what I mean by that is we can have properties just be static text that's passed in. So you can see here, this is vbind, and then there's a colon in text. By the way, the shorthand for that is just colon text is another way to do it. And we can, if we didn't have this colon here and we weren't binding anything, it would just pass in message, the message string, over as basically a literal property into the my component. So what this component does, all it does is it just has a div tag. It just, just shows some text to you. So this is just the basic example of how to use properties. I probably should have started with this first, but this is how you do basic properties in Vue.js. And so tester one is coming from this component, while text is being passed in from the parent Vue.js instance, which once again, we have this message from parent component. So if we look here, let me bring it up in my browser, dynamic props. 1 second. So yeah, I have hello from parent component testing text, but if I did something like this, and I saved it, you say hello message. So now it's taking this literal message that's in here. So if I put message 1, 2, 3, and it's just displaying that message, that's kind of like literal prop. On the other hand, if I go back and I put this colon in the front, which means it's binding to the text from the parent, from parent component, oops, and I save it, now you see the message being passed in, hello from parent component. Okay, hello Eric. What do you think about a TypeScript and Flow? What do you prefer? I definitely use TypeScript a little bit. In some, actually I was using Glimmer.js, which is another JavaScript library, a UI library. And I was using TypeScript. It was awesome, but I haven't really used Flow. But for TypeScript, one of the reasons I like it is you can definitely validate everything you're doing. Normally JavaScript's not a typed language, so you can have actually typed languages, and it's a little bit tighter, especially when you're writing. But if you're writing just fun programs, not as big of a deal. Let's keep going. Oh, so Jordan, I'm not sure what you're asking. What do you use for backend dev? Just let me know. At my work, we use a combination of different backend devs. We use Java with JBoss, which is one of our backends that we use. We use a little bit of Rails, Ruby on Rails too. So here, yeah, this is just a basic example. And once again, even though I'm not validating the props, I still have to put in props and then put an array of every prop that's being passed in. I can either do it this way, or I can have it props as an object and then put in validations in for each prop. So I'm gonna, this video is going a little long, so I will end with one more. This is one more thing. There's something called X templates. So you could see here when I was doing these dynamic props, I was creating a const variable called my component that was being referred to inside the Vue.js instance as my component right here. And then we have to use this hyphen case where we kebab case where we put the my component in here. However, though, if we didn't want to use something like that, we could use this script tag here, and then we have this ID, and then inside when we declare a component, we can put a hashtag, a hash, just like we were doing like the same thing like a CSS selector. And we put a my component here, and then this tells it to everything in the template be rendered inside this X template here. And I don't know, it says the same thing, hello from X template. So this is another way of doing it. Once again, once you get into more advanced Vue.js applications, you're going to use the Vue CLI. So that's how you would do it. Hello world. But just for simple applications, you can do this. All right, that's just a quick overview of just different ways of handling some really basic Vue.js and how to handle props, and a little bit on different ways of setting up your template. If you guys like these type of videos, please click that subscribe button and let me know. Let me know what you like. Thanks everybody for joining in on the live stream. I appreciate it. Take care.